Well, hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today I've moved into kind of our outback section where all our extra pots are and just a bunch of nursery stuff that we've got kind of piled up everywhere, and got a big chunk of this cleared off, maybe, I don't know, 30 feet or so of this cleared off. And today I'm going to build a low tunnel propagation area. So had some trouble with my propagation setup last year, and I think it was primarily due to wind. I've shown you some of my propagation results on last year's plants, and they were okay, but they weren't great. And I think we had a lot of mist loss due to wind, and this area is kind of wide open, and that's not something I've dealt with previously in previous years. So last year's setup was okay, and we had decent results on propagation, but I really want to try to increase our odds of success this year. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to build a low tunnel covered in plastic and put that whole area inside of it on mist. So that's the plan for today, and hopefully there's something here that'll be helpful to you as you're learning how to propagate plants yourself and grow out your own nursery. All right, guys, I've come up here to the back side of my barn where I've got my pipe bender fastened to the wall, and all this is a frame or a jig, whatever you want to call it, that gets your pipe for your low tunnel bent to a consistent and precise shape. I say precise. There's nothing all that precise about doing it when you're doing it by hand, but I've shown you guys this before, but this is just 3/4 inch EMT conduit like electricians use. You can find it in any hardware store. It's very common, and you just stick it in that little loop down there on the end and run it through just a bit, maybe a foot, something like that, and you come out here on the other end and you just bend it around. So that's not hard to bend. I'm not pulling on that hard at all. Anybody can do that. You don't have to be a big person, strong person, heavy person to bend that around. And you can just see how it just makes a nice arch that follows that frame all the way around. And then when you get it out here towards the end, it gets a little shorter and harder to bend. Just put you a cheater bar in there and pull it on around the last little bit, and about like that. And that's all there is to it. Then you just slide it back off there, just following the track right back around. And then you got you a little frame here, and from side to side, end to end, this side to this side, is about 6 feet. So that's about the width that we want for our low tunnel that we're building, and this will get you a consistent size on them. So that's all there is to it. Now, before we go any further, I want to just make sure you guys understand kind of the components to this mist system. It's really simple, and I think sometimes we try to overcomplicate things just because we don't understand them or we can't visualize exactly how it works. So coming from my right, your left, right here where this red valve is, this is just my water supply. So whatever your water supply is, whether it's the end of a garden hose or if you've got it, hard plumbed in like I do through your irrigation, whatever it is, you got to have a water supply to your propagation mist system. So that's all this is here, and it's just a simple inline PVC on and off valve. The next thing I have in line is a pressure valve. So you can't have 100 pounds of pressure coming into your propagation mist or it's going to just blow everything apart. So I've got this water pressure dialed way back. I don't know what it's at, but it's probably 50 psi or less. It might be 30. I really don't know, and it's not that important as long as everything's working. And the last thing in line here before we get to the actual mist components themselves is your propagation timer. This may be the most important part. Not that the others aren't important, but you got to have a propagation timer that can be programmed in seconds. Most of your irrigation timers, they only can be set to minutes and hours, whereas a system for mist propagation has to have the capability of being set to only run for seconds at a time. So that's a really important piece of the puzzle, and we'll get back. I'll show you a closer look at this here in just a minute. Now, the next part of this is going to be very individualized based on your setup, based on your situation. But the way that my water is coming in here is from this direction, but my propagation area goes that direction. So I'm going to take, excuse me, I'm going to take this little 90-degree elbow right here and just turn everything, glue it on here, and take everything and just turn it that direction. So then the next thing is this is just a 3/4 inch, 10-foot long PVC going that direction. And just gluing it in here. You can just set this up however you need to. This happens to be how I need to set it up for my setup. So just to get everything going in the right direction. So now our water flow is, just like to hold that for a second. So now our water flow is here, and then now it's going to be going that way with our timer valve here and our mist out there. Now, this is the part I really like when I'm building a shade tunnel or a propagation tunnel or an overwintering tunnel, or heck, one of my big tunnels in the back, is when you start putting the hoops up, then you can tell that something is actually happening. So just visual progress. So now I stopped this at about 15 or 16 feet, but I could extend it, you know, that much more this direction. So we got room to propagate a lot of plants this summer, but that's exactly what we intend to do. So the next step now is to start getting my misters into place, and let me show you how that goes. Now I'm going to be doing this different this year than I did last year, and you know, last year I had my mist. If you hadn't seen that video, I'll put a link to it right up here in the corner, but if you hadn't seen that video, I had all my mist stuff hanging from above last year so that it would spray down onto the cuttings, and that did work reasonably well, but I really think that doing it this way is going to be better. And the way that I'm actually doing this, since I'm going to be covering this hoop with plastic, it doesn't really matter if you fasten it to the top or if it comes from below. But what I'm going to be using is these little stick here, I don't know what you call it, this little wire stand, and this tubing. Now, this is actually made to work with drip irrigation, and I never have done drip irrigation. I really don't know how it works. But this is made, you can see this point here is made to be inserted into that black tubing that is used for that drip application. And I'm actually going to just cut the end of this off. I don't need this little fastener here. I don't need this insert, whatever it's called. I just don't need it. So I'm going to cut that off of there and still just take the tubing, and then we'll go from there. So I'm just going to take my knife and come right up above that little fitting there. There's a little barb on the end that, again, that's made for drip irrigation, and which is not what we're going to do. I'm just going to come right above it with a sharp knife and just cut that tubing right off there. Cut it nice and clean. And now we've just got an open end to work with. All right, now I'm going to just take a drill with a 3/16 inch drill bit. That fits the size of the tubing there, if you can see that. And again, that's 3/16 inch. I'm going to drill a hole right in top of my pipe here. Got a little water there in the pipe, you can see, and a nice clean hole results. And then all you do is take your tubing. You got 2 or 3 feet of tube here to work with, so you don't have to do any of this perfect as far as placement goes. And you just kind of force it down into that hole. Now this is why you have to dial your water pressure back. You know, you can't be pushing 80 pounds of pressure, and you can just stick these little rods here in the ground. You can stick them right here, over there, over here, just however you want to space it. That's all you need to do. In fact, I'm going to do them kind of on the side, just kind of offset and stagger. But you can't have a real high water pressure situation on these, or it will blow this out of the line here, and I know that because I've done it before. So anyway, we're going to get these stuck in the ground, drill the rest of the holes, put the rest of these in, and see what our setup looks like. Well, all right guys, I got it set up right out here, and I've got 5 heads that I've put in down through there, and they're one on this side, one on that side, one on this side, one on that side, excuse me. And I'm just trying to get it covered as well as I can. So I got my water pressure adjusted where I think is good, so I'm going to turn this on and give you a look at what it looks like. Now, the idea behind mist propagation is pretty simple. You do it during the growing season. This is not a wintertime activity. You do it during the growing season, so your plants have put on new, fresh flush of growth in the spring. Then you take that new growth, make cuttings out of it, you stick it in your sand or whatever media you're using, and you put it under mist. So what happens when you run your mist is you're keeping your cuttings damp on and off through the day. So you wet them with mist and the mist cuts off, and then they just sit there. Your cuttings just sit there until they dry, and as soon as they're dry, bang, you hit that mist again. So they're not wet 24 hours a day, and then you turn it off in the evening and give them plenty of time to dry before dark, so they're dry all night. And you just kind of have to work with your timing on that. You know, a good rule of thumb that I've found is about every 10 or 15 minutes, it needs to run for about 7 seconds. But if you're running higher water pressure, it may need less than that. If you're in a place with brighter sun, it might need more than that. You just kind of have to play with it and see. Just spray your mist and say, you know, how long is it taking this to dry on the leaves of my cuttings? Pay attention to your cuttings. Let them tell you, and you can get it worked out. But kind of a good rule of thumb is about 7 seconds every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, something like that. And I'm sure that I'll have to adjust that this year since I'm going to be covering this with white plastic. So actually I'm going to do plastic, and on top of the plastic I'm going to cover that with shade cloth so it doesn't get so hot in there. So anyway, we're going to move on and we'll get all of that done too. Well, all right, guys, let's fast forward a couple of days. Excuse the head cold in my voice. It's just what it is, but I've been down for a couple of days with that, and I made a decision about my covering here, and I decided to actually not go with the white plastic. And the reason that I've chosen to do that is because I've let this mist run a little bit, just watching it and kind of seeing how it behaves. And we had some fairly good gusts of wind, and these particular mist heads are spraying a mist that's not so fine and it's not blowing away. So, you know, that's something to take into consideration when you build your mist system. You may not be able to tell exactly how you need to do it until you kind of fine tune exactly how your system is working with your setup. So, you know, you always got to be ready and willing to adapt what you were going to do if you think there's a better way to do it. So going forward, you know, in the next few weeks as we start really propagating a lot of plants, if wind is drifting too much mist on us, if it's displacing it so it's not hitting the plants, then I'll take this off and I'll go ahead and cover it back up with white plastic, but I'm going to choose to not do that for now. So I think that's a good thing. I'd rather it be like this, just won't have as many issues with humidity and even it getting too hot inside and that kind of thing, but at least for now, that's why I've changed it back to just being covered with just a shade cloth. All right, guys, so here is the actual propagation tunnel. It's just the pipe bent like I showed you. The shade cloth that's covering it it's really bigger than it needs to be, but it's completely fine. I've just taken some cement blocks and weighed it down. I need to put a couple of more on here, but that'll just weigh down the edges of it and keep it from flopping over in the wind. And right up here on the top, I'll put, you know, 3 or 4 zip ties around this end, and also on the far end down there, put some zip ties on there just to hold it in place. Remember, the shade cloth does not catch a lot of wind. It's nothing like plastic, so you don't have to worry about it flying away on you. So I've got the concrete block here, and I've got one on that end. I'll probably put 1 or 2 more on each side right here, but that's about what it's going to be. And this should be a good setup to get propagation started this season. So, you know, a quick look inside the tunnel. You can see the misters here kind of staggered here, 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 and in the back there's 5 of them in there. We can extend that longer if we need it, but it is 6 feet wide and about 15 feet long. I really don't know, and it's not that important, but the last thing I want to show you is the timer here that I actually use. This is a dig timer, D-I-G, and this is where the batteries go right here. Now remember, this particular model of mister is not able to be hooked up to electricity, so it has to be powered by battery, but 2 AA batteries is all it takes, and those will power you through an entire propagation season. You know, somewhere around 3 months it'll power it. So I don't even have fresh batteries in it just yet. I took the ones out and I'm going to replace them, but it's pretty self-explanatory on how to program it. It's not difficult at all, and you can just use this control panel here
to set your propagation for whatever duration of time you want to set it for. And as we've talked about before, that may vary depending on your water pressure, your shade situation, exactly what plants you're trying to propagate, and your local conditions. So again, I start mine on about 7 seconds every 10 minutes, during the daylight hours, starting at maybe at 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. You just want to make sure that your cuttings are dry, before sunset. So, and again, that varies with time of year and your latitude, and there's a lot of variables there. So I can't tell you exactly when you should do that. Just understand the principle is you want your cuttings to be dry at night and you want to keep them damp during the day. So guys, this is my new propagation setup. I'll show you more about this in the videos ahead and just kind of as the season goes and show you what we're propagating, but it's real crude and it's real simple and it works really good. So I hope this is valuable for you. All right, so you can use this mist to propagate any kind of woody shrub, say, flowering quince, hydrangeas, anything like a boxwood, barberry. I mean, all the flowering shrubs, the woody shrubs, don't have to be flowering, but woody shrubs. You can propagate evergreens in this, like we do tons of arborvitaes in this. You can do perennials with woody stems on them, like butterfly bush and lavender, and we'll do a video on those in a few weeks. And anyway, you can just propagate a lot of plants like this, and that's what we're going to be getting started on here in just a matter of a few days. So guys, I appreciate y'all watching today. I love y'all, and I'll see you on the next one.